because we are now moving on to our Dumping Disinformation presentation, a Rural Truth Brigade training. And let's see, I am going to, that's what I wanted. Remove pin. Jody, I'm going to ask you to come off of mute because you are joining me for this. So I'm going to ask you to unmute as well. But so I want to just start off by saying how amazing it was that so many of you indicated that the Truth Brigade and learning to fight disinformation was one of your number one key issues that you wanted to learn more about at this summit. It was really honestly very shocking and surprising, and like duked it out for second and third place for a couple of weeks as we were getting responses from all of you. So it was really exciting and really, I think, affirming to the work that myself and that Jody do with the Indivisible Truth Brigade. So we're really excited to be here with you. Jody, would you like to say a few things about yourself?
Oh yeah, hello everybody. My name is Jody Ryan and I am so happy to be here, and I've been here all day and just loved everything that everybody was teaching, and the enthusiasm and the brilliance in the chat has just kind of blown me away. I have my chocolate bomb. I haven't used it yet. I'm saving it for after this presentation. And I might spike it a little bit, but don't tell anybody. Anyway, I'm just so happy to be here and so happy to continue this discussion that we've been having all day about messaging. And I think I'll leave it at that. And I think maybe go to the next slide and just tell everybody who's not familiar with the Truth Brigade what it's all about. So the Indivisible, I'm by the way, a co-founder of the Truth Brigade, and I've been working on it for about a year and a half, maybe closing in on 2 years now, and fight disinformation all the time, everywhere. And it's believe it or not, in this ugly swamp of disinformation, super rewarding. So what the Indivisible Truth Brigade does is we harness and amplify our grassroots power to disrupt disinformation. And that's really important. We're one of the few organizations in the nation that does this. And we're so lucky because of you, all the people on this call, all the activists out there fighting for progressive values. The Truth Brigade is powered by individuals because we know it works. We know that peer-to-peer sharing of information is the most impactful way that we can influence people. So we use all of you. We give everybody the opportunity to get involved, to change hearts and minds. And the ultimate goal is to build back trust in the foundation of a just society. It's very difficult to have a just society if nobody knows what to trust. So that's the Truth Brigade. And I did want to also just shout out all the speakers before, and especially Alexis, because one of the things that you'll probably notice, and some of the Truth Brigaders here noticed in the chat, was that a lot of the messaging techniques that Alexa recommended are very similar to Truth Brigade messaging techniques. And that's because we're all out there studying the same research, helping one another out, trying to come up with the most powerful messaging that we can all use together, because consistently shared messaging is so important. And the difference I think that you'll find is with the Truth Brigade presentation and the work is that we are solely focused on countering disinformation. So as opposed to kind of global messaging, this is very much drilled into the notion of how do we counter disinformation through using real people. And it's a very specific kind of messaging. So with that, Cameron and I wanted to share with you some comments from some of the people who've been working with the Truth Brigade. If any of you are on this call now, thank you. We'll be excited to see you. Some of you will know these people. But Cameron, if you're all set, why don't we share our video and let folks know how the community feels about the Truth Brigade.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick thing before I do that, I do just want to just kind of have this be a quick little notice for all of you who are already on this call, who have maybe already been to some of our Truth Brigade calls and meetings and conversations and trainings before. This is going to be similar, but it's also going to be very different. Jody and I have worked really hard to really put our red and rural thinking caps on as to how we approach this conversation. And so stick around, even if you have already been an avid member of the Truth Brigade, because there's going to be some great new information to experience and learn today. So I'm going to reshare my screen yet again for a different one. Let's see, resume here. I'm gonna make this full screen so you can all see it.
I'm Adrian from Pacifica, California, and I joined the Truth Brigade in 2020. And man, have I learned a lot since then. For example, I've learned that misinformation can crop up when knowledge is missing. We have a small apple tree in our yard, and one day I went outside and all of the apples were gone. My father-in-law asked me, "Why did you pick all the apples?" And so I asked him, "Why did you pick all the apples?" We still don't know what happened to our apples, so we just keep guessing. We keep trying to write the story. And the point is that as humans, we all do this. When faced with perplexing situations, void of information, we try to fill in the gaps. And I find that encouraging because it helps me recognize the connectedness and the community, the fact that we all do this. And that gives me hope because I think together in groups like the Truth Brigade, we can help to fill in those missing information gaps. And with that, let's hear from Janine.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Hi, I'm Janine, and I'm talking to you tonight from Littleton, Massachusetts. And I am part of the Truth Brigade because my second job out of college was at a television station owned by Pat Robertson. And it aired the 700 Club 6 hours a day. You guys can all go Google that later. I was there on the front lines, powerless, but watching while the Republican Party got in bed with the evangelical right. And I watched these evil people weaponize our language. I was working at that station when it was purchased by Rupert Murdoch and became part of the foundation of the Fox Media Company. I saw them take phrases like, both sides, and turn them into weapons against us. I watched them use language, which I love, as a weapon against the people in this country and actually build these horrible dams in our minds that keep us from seeing the future that could be progressive and liberal and equitable and just. I view the Truth Brigade as the little runnels of water that go through the cracks in the dam before the dam breaks, right? Anytime you have a dam, and behind the dam is the truth and the knowledge and what we need, but we have dams in our minds that are keeping so many citizens from seeing the reality of what's going on. We at the Truth Brigade, we're those little runnels of water that are going through those cracks. And if we keep that water running, we'll soften that dam and we'll burst it. I believe this. And now Ed is going to tell you more about it.
Hi, I'm Etta Williamson, and I'm from the Chicago area. I joined the Truth Brigade right in the very beginning when it launched in August of 2020. I was instantly challenged to think if I could make a difference in the spread of disinformation. And I also was chagrined to find that I might unwittingly have been furthering some of that with how I was using social media. So I reformed my social media habits, and now I never amplify lies. I don't engage with them no matter how much I want to, or no matter how much I want to set people straight. I don't. But I know I'm only one person, and I post on Facebook and Twitter, and actually I have a couple of different accounts, but I know that I have helped to be part of the 220 million impressions on Twitter that have been out there so far. I'm so committed to this that I got together with another person in my state Indivisible group, and we started a Truth Brigade Illinois, where we get together a couple times a month, and we're actually trying to patiently teach people, sometimes one-on-one, how to not amplify disinformation, how to craft and finalize powerful truth sandwiches, and then figure out how and where to use them. I know I've become a much better communicator because of the Truth Brigade, and I'm going to keep on fighting lies and bringing along as many people as I can to the brigade so that we can all do it together. Thanks. I'm going to have Buddy talk now.
Okay, I'm Buddy. I'm sorry I was muted. I'm from South Lake, Texas, Indivisible, Texas 24. Why I'm still in this fight and what it means to me. I'm in this fight because, one, without truth, democracy dies. Number two, we are making a quantifiable impact in this battle. Number three, being a better messenger, a better persuader, and a better activist is actually what Indivisible is all about. Number four, we've got the coolest hashtag. So we've got hashtag Truth Brigade, and we've got hashtag make lying wrong again, and others that we use for individual campaigns. So what it means to me, Truth Brigade is really a special community, and I am honored and grateful to be in this fight with each and every one of you. Special thanks to Jody and Lori and Tim and Kelsey. There's lots of others, but they're the backbone of this, and they're full of energy and goodness. So let's just keep rocking the Truth Brigade in the free world, as Neil Young said to Spotify. Pick a side and make it be truth. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey, who is on the program next. And I just have to give a shout out. Kelsey came and spoke at one of my.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that there. And we will go back to our slides. So I hope that you all enjoyed hearing from those testimonials. I have gotten to know many of those wonderful people who are speaking just now, and it's because of them that I still do this work every day. So Jody, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Great, thanks, Cameron. And yeah, thanks to all of you. I thought that we're just going to start with some very quick definitions here, because it will come up later. But basically, what is disinformation? And specifically, what is disinformation as opposed to misinformation? Because I'm sure you've all heard both of those terms. And the distinction is important because disinformation is information that's shared on purpose to do harm. And if you have a minute just to think about that, can you think of any examples maybe, and just go ahead and put them in the chat, of disinformation that you know is deliberately released in order to disrupt society, in order to divide people, in order to create fear? Can you think of anything like that? Somebody who's actually gone out there and shared disinformation. I'm looking at the migrant caravan, voter fraud, vaccines cause COVID, exactly anything Trump says. Now, to focus in on Trump. Trump sharing a lie that he knows is the truth to influence people and get them afraid, and to influence society to make it divided. That's disinformation. He's doing it on purpose. Here's the good news, which we'll talk about a little more later as well. There are only 10 or 20 large groups or groups of people who are actively sharing disinformation. A lot of what's causing real harm out there is, oh, Cameron, I thought I was doing the slides. Could you switch the slides, please? Misinformation. So misinformation is misleading, it is false, but people are not generally sharing it on purpose to cause harm. A lot of times people are sharing misinformation, especially around vaccines and masks and so forth. They're doing it thinking they're helping other people. They think they're spreading the truth, especially within their bubbles. And so that's disinformation and misinformation. And now back to Cameron to talk about how that impacts the rural world.
Thanks for that, Jody. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, you know, we're really putting on our thinking caps here, our red and rural hats, to really kind of hone into what disinformation is like for people in our rural communities. And the short and sweet and simple is it's very similar to what everybody in this country experiences. However, there are some unique aspects that are pretty specific to red and rural communities. So here are a couple of places that you might expect to see disinformation online. And we're going to start with the online framing for the first half of our discussion today. And so, like everywhere else, you might anticipate seeing major social media platforms being one of the biggest places that you're going to experience that. Doesn't matter if you live under a rock, everybody, generally speaking, is on some kind of social media platform today. And so that's where we most oftentimes see the spread of disinformation. However, very, in my personal opinion, kind of specific to more rural communities, suburb communities as well, is the website Nextdoor. Nextdoor is kind of another form of a social media platform, but it is very geared towards community and neighborhood driven like connections and networks. And so you might see very, very specific, very local neighborhood oriented pieces of disinformation there. And also online discussion boards. So, you know, we know it doesn't matter what community you're in. Most communities tend to have community boards. If you have a community center who has their own website, sometimes they have it on Facebook where they'll then post links that go off of Facebook onto their discussion boards. You might anticipate seeing some disinformation in those places. So let's talk about briefly the how and the why. And essentially, these kind of really, in particular, when we're talking about rural communities, the why is to really deepen the divides that we know, a lot of us intrinsically know this already, that exist between rural and urban communities. And, you know, it's also designed to prey on small community issues and residents. Now, the how is that when you are experiencing this, you might see this through people who are creating fake local news sites. They might be posting from, and this is my personal favorite one, outsider groups. And this is a rampant problem that we experience around the country, is people who come in and they're actually part of a community or of a population, and they will create like a new profile and act as though they're outsiders who are coming in to invade, and they will post disinformation. And we know in particular, I've seen this in the chat several times today, that when it comes to messaging, in particular, rural, very small red communities are very leery of outside groups and outsiders. And, you know, one of the things that was put in the chat a few minutes ago was the example of Antifa is coming. Antifa, this magical body. And you know, that's essentially an outside group when you talk about these small communities. The other place too that you might really anticipate experiencing some disinformation is talk radio shows, AM radio stations, where people are having these sometimes very heated, sometimes just very one-sided view conversations about politics and religion and current affairs. So this is a very broad, you know, kind of 30,000 foot look. There's so many other places and reasons that go into this, but here are just a few. So next that I'm going to talk about is really kind of focusing on localized disinformation. And essentially what this boils down to is that people who are disinformers, or bad actors, as we generally refer to them within the Truth Brigade, they want to appear like they're a concerned neighbor. somebody within your neighborhood, in your community. And so they will be posting in very like hyper local spaces online. I've experienced this here in Cedar Rapids, where I've seen people who will post on the Cedar Rapids Public Library Facebook page about, oh, did you see the public library is endorsing gay marriage because they rent out their roof, and there's a gay couple who rented out the roof to get married. They have this really pretty rooftop garden. My husband and I actually thought about renting it, but we didn't. And so like, then these people don't actually even live here. They don't live in Cedar Rapids. They don't even live in Iowa. So it's like, why are you commenting on this? But we also see them gather in person in local community spaces when they are locals. And so we're going to come back to the in-person a little bit later, but I just really wanted to frame that for all of you right there. So you might be wondering, how do you actually combat toxic disinformation? And the short and sweet and simple of it is us, you, every single person who is here on this call right now. You are how we fight toxic disinformation. What we know is that human beings are persuaded by other human beings, especially when these are people who they already know, who they already have some baseline level of trust with. So again, we're going back to this idea of your neighbors, people in your community who you already have a relationship with, but maybe you don't really have a relationship with them. Maybe they're your regular barista at your local coffee shop. Maybe they're your pharmacist. Maybe they're somebody that you sit next to at church in the pews. And so we also know that disinformation tries to erode trust, but consistent messaging and engagement with these individuals can rebuild that trust. And that's super, super important. And lastly, we also know that numbers aren't everything. It doesn't take a lot of us to make a huge difference. But at the same time, the more of us that there are, the greater the exponential power. And I liken this to a pond. When you have one pebble that gets tossed into the pond, it has 1, 2, maybe 3 weak ripples before they kind of die out. But when you have 253 pebbles that get thrown like at sporadic times, not only is that a single set of ripples, but that builds a wave. So the more of us who are doing this very hard work and who are having these very real conversations and combating disinformation anywhere and everywhere that we see it, the stronger we are and the more that disinformation will get pushed back. So, Jody, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Karen. I imagine that by now, a lot of you who are unfamiliar with the Truth Brigade may be wondering, but what exactly is it? And what exactly is everybody doing? So here are the basics. So essentially, the Truth Brigade is a program that you can join by clicking a link. And I can ask Scott, maybe if you could pop the link to join in the chat. And so the first thing that happens is people all over the country join the Truth Brigade just by signing up a simple form. And then behind the scenes, we, meaning Truth Brigade staff and external expert partners in disinformation who are living this world every day and watching it every day, we come together and we determine which is the most viral and damaging disinformation in the moment. And every 2 weeks, we create a campaign for you, a message campaign for you to share. And it's a pretty simple message, and we'll learn a lot more about that later. But so twice a month, you're given a model message to personalize and share. And you can share those messages online, on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you're most comfortable online. You can take the frame of that message and you can expand it into a blog, expand it into an op-ed, letter to the editor, and then you can even use the basic message that we recommend that you personalize and share in conversations, in texts, wherever. As I said, these messages are really carefully designed. They're based on tons and tons of research. The race class narrative, by the way, feeds into how we devise our messages, and a lot of other research into the psychology of disinformation and how people respond. And again, we'll talk more about that in detail a little bit later today. They're usually a few sentences long. They usually take up the frame of what we call a truth sandwich, and that structure of something villains and values, villains and vision, very similar to the truth sandwich. And when people are sharing their messages, we ask that they share using a hashtag Truth Brigade. So that's the basic structure of the Truth Brigade. Next slide, please, Cameron. Why are we doing what we're doing? What are the big picture strategies? For the Truth Brigade, we're really focusing just on 3 essential strategies or tactics. 1, disengagement. So disinformation, as I mentioned at the beginning, is spread, let's start online. It's actually spread by only 10 or 15 major sources. If you're on Facebook and you see like the top 10 sources of disinformation, it's always the same people. And the way disinformation spreads online is people click on stuff, they share stuff, they comment on stuff, and what that does is it increases the prominence of the lies online. So in other words, every time you click on something, it makes it more popular, even if you're clicking on it to say, no, 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 this is wrong, this is wrong. So what we're number 1 tactic is we want to reduce the popularity of disinformation in the algorithms online. And a very simple way to do that is just don't click. Seems really simple, awfully hard to do when you're in the moment, because as Alexa said earlier, a lot of bad actors are spreading disinformation because to prey on the emotions. And so emotional triggering messages get us to want to respond. So it's not easy to disengage, but that single strategy is really meaningful. And then the other important big picture strategy of the Truth Brigade is that we want to encourage critical thinking, both online and offline. And I'll be talking about that, I think, yes, in one moment, but it's a foundational vision of the Truth Brigade, because we know we're not going to change people's minds with one conversation or one tweet, but we do know we can open minds with the correctly structured message. And then, of course, we want to grow, because consistent messaging shared by the most people is the most impactful. And I think that's quite intuitive, but the more people we can bring in to do this work, sharing the same basic message across the country, the more repetition and the more it sticks. So I think the next slide, Cameron's about critical thought. Yeah, just to dive a little more deeply into that. So over toward the end of 2021, we were looking at the Truth Brigade work and how we structure our messages and what we recommend. And we did a lot of research into how people really think about things. And can you really make a measurable difference, which is hard, right? How do you measure how many people kind of interact with something? How do you measure changing minds? And we found this amazing MIT study. And what we learned was that, first off, 85% of people who share disinformation do it inadvertently. Like I mentioned earlier, people are clicking on things and sharing it without thinking, which is great news, right? I mean, it's, for me anyway, it's an awful lot better to think of a world where people are accidentally sharing lies than a world in which 85% of the population is intentionally lying to each other. They're not. You know, it's I think thinking about the motives of why people are sharing disinformation, it's really helpful when we come to the sharing common values. So if 85% of people are sharing disinformation inadvertently, here's the really, really cool discovery. One message recommending that that population check the accuracy of the source of the disinformation, it impacted the sharing by 15%. One message meant that there was 15 fewer disinforming stories shared. People just needed one little note saying, hey, where'd you get that information? Or do you think that's an accurate source? They started thinking for themselves, and the impact lasted for months. So what we found when we were looking at this study was that what we've been recommending to people all along in terms of how we suggest they share their messages has been right, but now there's actually numbers to prove it. We can open minds. So next slide, please. All right, so about our impact. Talking about sharing all those messages, opening those minds, more than 5,000 people who joined the Truth Brigade. We have people in every state and every type of area. A lot of rural people are in the Truth Brigade. We've done 51 message campaigns, and Cameron could just click and it'll, yeah, so here's our measurable views on Twitter. 245 million views on Twitter alone. And we can only measure on Twitter. We can't measure on Facebook because we can't measure private posts. So that's a lot of eyes. And you think about doing that math, about 15% less things shared. I don't know really what it would end up being, but it's making a measurable difference. Do the next slide, please. And this is still me, Cameron? Yes. So I mentioned that we send out campaign messages. They always come with explainers. And I'm going to share my screen and just show everybody an example of what a campaign message explainer looks like. And say hello to everybody. Hasn't seen my full face before.
Also, so you know, Jody, you did just mute yourself. So make sure you unmute.
Thanks, I didn't mean to do that. So can everybody see this now? This is, I see a few nods. This is last week's message explainer. And the name of the campaign, the message campaign, was Get It Right on SCOTUS. We wrote this right before the nomination, yay, was announced, but we can still use the messaging. So I'm just going to quickly run through this just to let you know, every campaign explainer has a table of contents at the start so everybody can find what they're looking for. The first thing that you'll see is that there's a quick start. So for people who are familiar with how to do this, just go right to the quick start and you'll get a paragraph telling you all about the campaign and this week's Truth Sandwich. Now, as you can see, and Karen will be going into depth on the Truth Sandwich, but you'll see it's just a paragraph. This is not a long message, right? But this is a really cool thing. We now have click to tweets and click to post on Facebook. So when you click on a message, we'll see that this works here. This takes me right to my Twitter account. And so that makes it really easy to share these messages. And then once you're in there, hello, you can personalize it so that it's your voice, which is really important. Hello, everyone at the Rural Summit. Yay, easy to do, yeah? You can do the same thing on Facebook. It doesn't populate the words for you, but you can just cut and paste into Facebook. And then there are supporting articles for this message campaign. Everything we do comes with lots of resources and support, background information. And then here's how to personalize your message. So we give suggestions for ways that you can make these messages your own, graphics that you can use. This message in particular includes a graphic from a group called Ultraviolet, which is focusing on racist and gender-focused disinformation and getting the media to talk differently about and not use stereotypes. And so we love their graphics, and so we partner with them on this campaign, and we're sharing their message as well. So this is detailed information on how to write a Truth Sandwich, which Cameron will go into next. And then the materials behind our strategies. So you get this every 2 weeks, a message explainer that looks like this. So I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to continue to share my screen and go back into the presentation. Let's see. and hand it over to Cameron.
Okay, so you're gonna run the slides now. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I did drop in the chat for everybody the link to that explainer guide. I know that you know, having a screen share of a document can be a little bit challenging with different font sizes and different levels of vision accessibility. So I will drop that link one more time in the chat for everybody. So that way, if you do want to take a look at that explainer, please feel free to do so. Awesome. So let's talk about how we do this. And the reason that we're going through a training that a lot of you who have been to some of our calls before, it might seem very similar, is because you don't actually have to be a member of the Truth Brigade to really follow this model. Of course, we want you to join. We want you to come be a part of this work with us, but it's a really effective model overall. And that model is what we call the Truth Sandwich, which focuses on 3 key parts called discovering common grounds, disrupting disinformation, and dreaming of a better future, which you can see kind of in between the layers on our sandwich there. So when we look at this truth sandwich, I like to think of it as the Krabby Patty personally, because I'm a big SpongeBob fan. Our top bun, which we're going to really dive in deep today on this call with you, but our top bun is where we are discovering truthful common grounds. Then the patty, or whatever goes in between the 2 buns, is where we are trying to disrupt the information. And we do this by discrediting the liars and the bad actors. And we do that by encouraging critical thought. And what's really key here, and I know that Jody's already said it, I'm saying it now, it's going to get said again by the time we get to the end of this, is that we don't want to repeat the language that the bad actors, that the disinformers, that the liars are using. It's sticky language, which it's really hard to basically use that without using it in order to shine a light on what's happening. But you can do it, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. And then the bottom bun is where we are dreaming of a better future through a truthful, either an action, a call to action. Maybe this is call your senators, or, you know, write a letter, or stand up for what's right, or whatever your action is, or an emotion. Again, this is one of the things that we talk about is always kind of framing your truth sandwich within your story of self. Why is this so important to you? That's how you really drive this message home with people, is framing it around why this impacts you, why this impacts people that you know, people that you love. And lastly, a hook. This again is what, like, pulling on the heartstrings, if you will. So that's what we talk about when we talk about the truth sandwich. Next slide, please, Jody. So let's take a look at a recent message. This one's just a couple of weeks old. I picked one that was super salient to the moment. I know, what was it, Monday in the news, they were talking about the truckers. But so this message is from February 9th, and it says, local communities don't deserve to be intimidated by angry #Canada truckers, blaring horns and disrupting lives. That is our top bun. That is discovering common ground right there. The next part of this message says, their groupthink is fueled by disinformation meant to divide us versus them. That is our patty, if you will, or anything that goes, that if you're a vegetarian, your lettuce or your peanut butter. That's the middle section where we're disrupting the information. Then we seal this message up with our bottom bun, and we say, remember, protecting freedom means supporting tolerance, trust, and inclusion. #Truth Brigade. So very, very simple. It's 3 lines. It can be longer. In fact, we have many members who and we're going to talk about what you can do with your truth sandwich, but you can keep it just the 3 lines, which is perfect for things like Twitter, which has character counts. But you can build on it. You can have conversations around it. You can write a letter about it. It doesn't have to just be the 3 lines, which is why this is such a flexible format. Next slide, please. So Jody and I are here for you. We know there's been some questions. We've been grabbing them. I want to thank our other facilitators who are here with us today who are helping to grab those questions. So Jody and I are going to answer a couple of questions that have been put in the chat. So Jody, I'm going to toss this question to you from Callie, who says, I see a lot of these tactics used by people that are on our side. Should we encourage our own team to avoid the concerned neighbor tactic or not? I know it's easy to go, well, we're right, that's why it's okay for us, but not the opponent.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't.
Sure. So essentially, Callie's asking, should we be avoiding the whole concerned neighbor like tactic behind our messaging?
Avoiding the, oh, I see what you're saying, because we talked about the concerned neighbor as a tactic that the bad actors are using. I got that.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely not, because we are concerned neighbors. So the thing about the Truth Brigade is that this is not sort of an idea to how to manipulate people. This is based on the idea that we want a society that's based on authentic relationships and truth, and not based on propaganda. Someone asked if disinformation was propaganda. Yeah, it is. And so if you are a concerned neighbor, for sure, the idea of finding common value is, if your neighbor has this, you're both concerned about the same thing. Someone's putting up a stop sign in the corner of your block, and one person really doesn't like it because it's feels like government interference, and another person maybe doesn't like it because it blocks their driveway. I don't know what it is, but you might not like something for different reasons, but you have a common value about not liking it. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it was a great answer. So our next question, I will answer this one. Where did I just have that? It was about, should we, here it is, from Linda, who said, I assume we should not quote tweet because we're sharing the message. And Linda, the answer is your assumption is correct. We should not be quote tweeting the bad actors' pieces of disinformation. I think Jody will agree with me here. One of our biggest core tenets of the Truth Brigade is do not click, do not interact, do not like, do not make angry faces or the thumbs down or share or retweet or quote tweet or anything like that. Because when we do that, the bad actors are able to track the engagements that their posts, that their websites, that their tweets, their comments have, just like we do. So the numbers that Jody and I have showed you, we track the same way that they will. And so when they see that, oh, look, 50,000 people just clicked on my anti whatever tweet, they're now going to use that as fuel to build a bigger fire. So absolutely, let's avoid quote tweeting. However, what you can do, and we always recommend this, is to search out other Truth Brigaders, retweet, quote tweet their messages. Anytime that people are using the truth sandwich and they are ending it with hashtag Truth Brigade, you can search Twitter, even Facebook, for that hashtag Truth Brigade. I'm pretty sure you can also search it on Instagram, but I have yet to actually try that one myself. But so yeah, definitely do that. And let's do one more before we move on to our next section. So let's see here. A question to you, Jody. And this is a good one. From Pamela. How effective is the Truth Brigade with folks with sincerely held beliefs that are based on lies? Folks whose identities are invested in maintaining these lies?
I love that question. What I would say is let's answer it in the next section, because that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. Although I will say short answer is we can't, just as Alexa was saying this morning, it doesn't make sense. If a mind is truly closed, it doesn't make sense we're not going to be able to open it. But on the other hand, because we're not trying to change minds as much on particular issues as we are to open minds, that gives us a lot of room. So I think that I'll be able to answer that best just by moving on to talk about how we find common values, because that's really the answer to everything. And just I feel like maybe I just dismissed this question a little bit. So I should also say that the notion that trying to convince someone whose mind has been, essentially kind of brainwashed, but is really sincere in their beliefs, I hear you. I mean, I think that's what we're all most worried about, right? And it is that trickle of water. It's drop by drop, mind by open mind is how I think about it. So it's not going to be one conversation, but I do think it's possible. It's that the persuadable middle. Cameron, should I go ahead with the next?
Yep.
Yes? Great. So now we're going to do a workshop together. This is a little mini workshop. And I hope that you'll all participate by writing answers to things in the chat. This is the first time we've done this particular workshop. So I'll appreciate your indulgence and also be interested in your thoughts afterwards as to what you thought and what you liked about it and what we might do better. So basically, the top of the bun for fighting disinformation and any conversation that we're going to be having with someone where we're trying to disrupt that flow of the lies is all about discovering common ground. But how do you do that? One thing that I find really helpful is that I remember that the goal of the disinformer is to engage us emotionally, typically through fear and through desire. Right? So those are the two things, and I will be providing an example in a sec. To find common ground, when we see something that's disinformation, ask, what fear are they trying to trigger and what do we want? So I'll give you an example. So let's say the disinformation is vaccines cause infertility. So let's pause for a minute and think about that. What is the fear underlying this disinformation? What are they trying to tap into that most people feel if they believe that vaccines cause infertility? So you can start writing in the chat and I'll share I'll share a couple of possibilities. Loss of masculinity, fear of science. Here's a bunch that I thought of. Ego loss, these are wonderful. Fear of being able to have children, generally afraid of the health impact. They're afraid of dying, right? But what they want is to do the right thing. And what they want is to stay alive. So when we start diving down into this, we realize that these fears are relatable. Even if we don't believe that vaccines cause infertility. I would think most people on this call probably have been vaccinated and, and believe that vaccination is a good thing. But we all can relate to these general fears underlying this. So now let's see if we can flip the fear into a sentence that you can relate to. And I know that's tricky without seeing an example, so I'm going to do it for you. So I want to live a long time. That would be an excellent first sentence in a truth sandwich because it's the truth and it's shared by many people. In the middle of the truth sandwich, then you'll go on to talk about the specific disinformation in a way that makes people question the motives of someone who would share that disinformation about infertility. But for that first sentence, it's really important that we're engaging people. We all hope for a long life. I want to have a healthy family. Oh, these are so great. I want to have children. We all want to be healthy. Oh, I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for putting these ideas in the chat. All right, it's easier than you think, right? At first, when we start thinking about this. So again, bottom line, when you're thinking about writing the first sentence of your truth sandwich, just think about, okay, is there a relatable underlying fear or desire? Whoops, sorry, I switched to the next slide without announcing it. Cool, so we are going to the next slide. So now I want to take a little deeper dive into different mindsets. If we stopped here, you would already kind of know how to think about writing that top bun of the truth sandwich. But I do want to dive a little more deeply, because the more we understand other people in our lives, the better we'll be able to talk with them in a way that makes sense for everybody, and that in the end helps our society, because we're persuading people not to do something they don't want to do, but to make choices based on research, make choices based on thinking. So the progressive mindset, as you've probably heard, is often called based on the idea of we're in a family with a nurturing mother. This is kind of echoing a lot of what you heard this morning, so I'm going to kind of go quickly through it. The ideas of things and concepts that appear to the progressive mindsets are things like empathy, solidarity, growth and change, complexity, and interdependence. The conservative mindset is very much focused on competition and tradition. So it's an entirely different way of thinking. Both sides think the other side is incorrect, right? But within both sides, we believe this, right? This is how I don't know if it's nurture, I don't know if it's nature, but it's how we see the world. It's often called a kind of a stern father way of looking at the world. And values that appeal in that mindset are competition, authority, tradition, linear thinking, and independence. And you can see when you're thinking about something like vaccinations, progressives are, hey, when we're all healthy, public health works, and I can be healthy. Conservative mindset is different. It's when my family is healthy, I'm healthy. So it's a really kind of, it's more inward and less outward. So part of that, we can use that information to do something that's called a moral reframe. So the moral reframe is a technique of thinking about the position of the other person and come up with a way that the other person can support a position because we're framing it in a way that's consistent with their moral values. So that's a little bit confusing. So I can give you an example to kind of help you talk that through. So let's say we're talking about government policies designed to stabilize the climate. So the disinformation around climate is that the climate legislation will take away your independence. That speaks to the mindset of the conservative value system, right? It speaks to these moral values: father knows best, self-sufficiency, livelihood, and business. A way that we can reframe the climate discussion so that it appeals to a different mindset is climate disruption endangers our ability to put food on the table and earn a living. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. So basically, we're not trying to convince other people of the progressive position by arguing, and we're not trying to use language like, gee, we need to save everybody in the planet. Instead, we're drilling down to what is the moral value of the person who believes the disinformation. In this case, the moral value is that people need to be self-sufficient. Well, the argument is simply that, as I said, look, you can't farm in a drought, right? It's self-sufficiency can't happen. You can't run your own business if external forces are getting in the way. So I hope that's clear. And this, it might be a little bit confusing, but we will be sending you the slides, and so you'll be able to understand that. So I wanted to play a quick little word game with everybody here. And that is, if you can put in the chat, I'm going to be naming some words and ask you to put in the chat where you think the words fit, whether they're magic words that are triggers for the progressive movement or the conservative movement. So start with the word fair. Do you think that that might fit with progressives or with conservatives? Oh, wait for a minute. Progressive. Do the magic click. Yes, it's progressive. How about security? Oh, a couple of people put both, which is interesting. What yep, security, conservative. So I'm just going to run through these. Self-sufficiency we've talked about as a conservative value. What about change? Yep. Help. It's an interesting one, right? I'm just going to go ahead and click through these. The next one is think, but please continue to participate in the chat. Heritage, that's a really interesting one because traditions, heritage, conservative, that's right. The word prove. So this might be surprising. So go with progressives because things involving the mind and in thinking tend to be more progressive. Things involving the body tend to be more conservative. When I think you can guess, conservative, loyal, conservative. How about freedom, accountability, and responsibility? Both. Da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun. Yes, that works for both. All right. Thank you for participating in that with me. So now we're going to be doing a quick worksheet together, and we're going to kind of go through this, as I said, pretty quickly, but you will all get this worksheet and you'll be able to fill it out. You make a copy of it and fill it out yourself. So the disinformation we're going to talk about is Antifa is coming to your town, which Cameron tells me is a frequently seen disinformation in rural areas. Oh, thank you for that worksheet. So I'm going to now stop sharing for a second and share. Actually, I'm going to share my screen so you can all see. This is the sandwich top. So fears and desires. What are people afraid of? If someone sees this, Antifa's coming to your town, can you pop in the chat, what are they afraid of? And Cameron, could you read some aloud to me?
Sure. Fear of outsiders, fear of the other,
Yeah.
fear of, whoa, also now we got a lot of them coming.
Yay.
Terrorists, of disruption, the unknown. Oh, I like that one. Violent protest, Black Lives Matter, imaginary boogeymen. Let's see. Change. That's a good one.
Are there some wants associated with this? What would people want?
Safety and security.
Yep.
Peace. For things to stay the same.
Oh, you guys are so good.
Control and order.
Oh, that's so great. And what are some conservative moral values that might be underlying this fear? And some of them you've already said. Change is bad. Yep. I wrote keep my town as it is. Agitators are dangerous. I love that.
Outsiders will pollute us. Oh, I like Carol's here. This is a good one. We have a right to our own lifestyle.
Exactly. Oh, this is so good. So we are already closing in on the end of our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and let's all work on drafting the first sentence together. Given, I'm not sure if you can all see, by the way, what I'm typing. I'm so sorry if this is a little small. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger to make sure you can see. I hope that's better. So given this, given fears and desires and the conservative moral values, what kind of first sentence that can people think of that might appeal to the conservative mindset and still be true to our common values? We all want to live in a safe and secure environment. Exactly. We love our community. Oh, that is so good. You guys rock. You are so good. Oh yeah, see, there's an argument there. Why don't we stick to, yeah, what a good common ground sentence would be. Again, we're trying to find points of agreement here, because that's how we're going to fight disinformation, is by ultimately having enough people sharing consistent common values. Okay, so I think we've got a great first sentence. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand it over to Cameron to close us out.
Thank you so much. Give me 1 second here while I pull up the slides again. So this is, as I think I said this at the beginning of this section, this is a conversation. And it's an evergreen conversation. It's something that always needs to be happening. And so there's so much more that we could say, that we could, dive into. But for today, because you all have been amazing attendees for this super long event, and we want to respect your time, we're going to skip a little bit ahead, and we want to give you some quick reminders about some of our best practices when it comes to countering disinformation. And these are, again, no clicks, no comments, no likes, no thumbs down, angry faces on the bad guys. This is anywhere that you see it. Now, there was a question asked earlier about screenshotting. So long as you are not on Snapchat, because Snapchat actually records who does and does not screenshot things, then theoretically that's fine. Especially if it's something that you're seeing really prevalent and you want to share to people like Jody and myself. But I don't recommend that you then go and post your screenshot somewhere. If you name it, you spread it. And as Jody always likes to say, journalists need to learn this too. And she is so very right. The next one is to be authentic. Remember, we want these messages to always be finding those common grounds, to be tugging on the heartstrings. Next, we don't argue. We expose the motives of the bad actors. And this is really hard, especially when we talk about taking this work offline, which I'm going to give you all a quick sneak preview, if you will, that one of the things Jody and I are working on for this year is a focus on taking this work offline and bringing it to in-person and to local communities. So definitely stay tuned for that, because I'm very excited. Try a truth sandwich. Try this method that we've just looked at. Come to one of our calls, learn more about it, and try this work with us. And if you do write a truth sandwich, hashtag Truth Brigade it, pop it on Twitter, put it on Facebook. If you make TikTok videos, make a TikTok video of you saying your truth sandwich. If you're on Instagram, you can post it on Instagram and still use your hashtag Truth Brigade. And so those are some of our best practices. And we're going to skip on to our recap. Jody, do you want to close us out here?
Oh, sure. Am I talking? I'm not muted,
Yes.
right? Yes, so great. So thanks, everybody. We love presenting this to you. We love your enthusiasm for fighting disinformation and misinformation. And we hope that you'll join us in this fight. And as we said, you'll be joining a lot of people, personalizing and sharing consistent messaging developed by expert partners, and everything's grounded in best practices. So we are, thank you so much for your time and for listening to this and for keeping your mind open to a positive approach. They said this is an ugly world, the world of disinformation. And it's particularly ugly when you're in a rural area and you feel so isolated, and everywhere you see lies around you. And I get that. I was raised in a small town. So I just want to do a personal thank you for fighting this fight, knowing how oppressive it can be. And I just want to leave you with, when you start thinking about shared values, when you start thinking about not fighting facts with facts, but instead questioning the motives of the messenger and finding a vision that you can share, your heart kind of opens up. You feel better, you feel more empowered and less beaten down by all of the bad messages that you're seeing all over the place. It's a different mindset for us too, to have this open mind and open heart. You can counter disinformation without being a bad guy. You must counter disinformation without being a bad guy. So join our community or find your own community. We're so grateful that you're here in this fight with us. And thank you so much. Back to Tricia now, I think. And thank you, Cameron.
Cameron and Jody, that was